So today we're learning the last factoring method. And then next week is just reviewing them, solving problems where it doesn't tell you what method to use, like where you actually have to know what method you need to use. But this is the last one we're learning, so that means we're testing next week. The success criteria for this lesson, so this lesson is factoring polynomials with 4 terms by grouping. You need to be able to group similar terms together, factor out the GCF from each group, factor the common binomial out, and then be able to check your answer by distributing. I'm recording now. I'll link it in the slides. This is the same lesson I gave last year. So I don't know, I just have it in here. And then other shorter videos if you want to check those out. The practice you're going to work on today, and I will also check it today towards the end of class. So evens or odds on that amounts to 9 problems that you're going to do. So whether it's 10 minutes you get or 15 minutes, I will just give you points for whatever you finish in class today. And if you want full points, all you need to do is upload it to Schoology when you do finish. The exit ticket, we should have time to take it today, but we'll see. The password is on the board, so if you finish your practice and you check your answer, so I want you to finish it and check it first, then you can move on to the exit ticket early. Otherwise, I saved the last 10 minutes of class for it, so at 10:30, I'll tell you to take it, because it's only 2 questions. So I think 10 minutes is more than enough time that you'll need. And I don't want to push it out further because I do want us to be able to review next week and have review games. So we're just gonna throw it all in today. All right, so the faster we get through this, the more time you have to practice. We are factoring polynomials with 4 terms. So here's the steps. First, and for every method, you really should be checking for a GCF first. So kind of write that in here. Check for GCF. Don't ask me questions while I'm teaching, unless it's about this specifically. So step 1, check for GCF. Is there a GCF between these 4 terms? So between 1 and 7, 2 and 14. The only GCF is 1, and we never factor that out. Can I factor out an x from each term? No. So then we see that we have 4 terms, and to factor polynomials with 4 terms, we do so by grouping, which is what these steps outline. So we group the first 2 terms together and the last 2 terms together. Really, we're grouping similar terms. So even though you can usually get away with just grouping the first 2 and the last 2, sometimes, and we'll see later, there are situations where you need to rearrange it so that the similar terms are next to each other. But as you can see, in the blue group, these are similar terms. They both have a lot of x's. And in this one, they have a GCF between the coefficients. So group the similar terms together. Step 2 is to factor out the GCF from each binomial. So binomial means what? Two-term expression. So I have a 2-term expression here, 2-term expression there. I need to factor the GCF from each group. So what's the GCF of the blue group? I can factor out an x. How many? 2. So x squared. And then in the parentheses is what we get from dividing these 2 by x squared. So what's x cubed divided by x squared? X. And what's 7x squared divided by x squared? 7. So do that for each group. Now we're on to the red group. So what's the GCF between 2x and 14? 2 and it's positive, so put plus 2. And then factor it out. What's 2x divided by 2? And what's 14 divided by 2? Good. So that's step 2. Factor the GCF from each binomial / group, if that helps you remember. Question so far? All right, step 3 is to factor the common binomial out. So if you see the blue group and the red group, what do they have in common? The parentheses, right? So I'm factoring the common binomial out. After step 2, you should have a common binomial. If you don't, you might have to like play around with the order a little bit, maybe group other terms together, or factor out like a negative instead of a positive. But you should have a common binomial after this step. That will be part of your answer. The other part, and so I don't want you to write this down for a second because I'm going to erase it. The other part is what you get from factoring this out from each term. So meaning dividing it by x plus 7 and then this term by x plus 7. Again, I wouldn't write this down because it's kind of sloppy. But when you have the same thing on each side of the fraction bar, what happens? It cancels out. So like this times this divided by this. Will these cancel out? And then I just have the x squared. Same over here. Same thing on top and bottom. Those would cancel. And then I have just the 2. All right, again, I'm going to erase that because that's a little ugly. But that's where we're getting that from. So give me 1 second. So you factor the common binomial out. That'll be part of your answer. The other part is your GCFs, or like your leftovers, if you want to call it that. So your common binomial is here. I'll write it in here so you know. I'll just abbreviate it. What's over here was your GCFs. So questions about that step? All right, so this is the answer. Step 4 is just telling you how you can check your answer. So you can distribute or FOIL to check your answer. I'll FOIL because it's a little neater than drawing the arrows. So what's x times x squared? And what's x times 2? Good. Inner terms now, 7 times x squared. And 7 times 2. And you know, aside from the order, this does match our original problem. All the signs match up. They're all positive here. They're all positive there. Yeah, these two are switched, but these are equivalent. So we did do it correctly. Questions about that? All right, Genesis, did you go already? Okay, you can go now, and then I'm assuming nothing after her. Yes. All right, so then let's look at a couple more examples, and then I'll have you try one. So let's look at number 3. So now there's some negative numbers in there. You can start. You can start by grouping the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. All right, and then if you need to make adjustments, you can make adjustments. You'll see later that what you're really doing is grouping similar terms together. And then find the GCF of each group. What's the GCF between the blue group? Just 1 W? W squared, good. So what's W cubed divided by W squared? And what's 5W squared divided by W squared? Good, it's positive, so put plus 5. Now in the red group, what's our GCF? is correct. Now, there's no rule that says like you have to factor out a positive or negative 8. But it is a rule that after this step, I need to have a common binomial. So let's just start by factoring out a positive 8 and see what we get. What's negative 8w divided by 8? If it's divided by a positive 8, then it's a negative w. I'll erase this in a second. Just bear with me. And then what's negative 40 divided by 8? Negative 5. Now, does this parentheses match this one? No, the signs are opposite than what we need them to be. So what could I do to this, what I factored out, to make it so that the signs match up? But I could change this to a negative. So sometimes you kind of just have to plug it in and see. Because if I divide a negative 8 now, I get a positive w. Negative 8w divided by negative 8 is positive w. And then negative 40 divided by negative 8 is a positive 5. Once you have the common binomial, then you can continue with the last step. So my answer will have the common binomial. And then the other parentheses will be what? The GCFs or the leftovers, whatever you want to call them. These other things that we factored out. Questions about that? All right, then I want you guys to try number 5. So you try number 5. All right, you can start by grouping the first 2 terms and the last 2 terms. That usually works. If you do that, you find the GCF of each group. And remember to keep the sign that's directly in front of each term. All right, so GCF of the first group is p cubed. Divide it from each term. P squared minus 6 is what you get. From the second group, the GCF had to be a negative 2 if I was going to end up with a common binomial as the first one. So once we did that, the common binomial will be part of your answer. Your GCFs make the other parentheses. And if you had it reversed, like p squared minus 6 and p cubed minus 2, that's perfectly fine, as long as they're both there and the signs are correct. So questions on 5. All right, we're going to look at the back side now. Let's do an example where the GCF is a little bit bigger. So let's look at number 8. So group similar terms together. I'd say that these are similar, and then the last 2 are similar. So what would be the next step after grouping them? Not distribute. I need to, if you look at your steps, find the GCF of each group. So what would be the GCF of the blue group? 2y cubed. So then divide that from each term. 2y to the 4th divided by 2y cubed is y to the 1st, because the 2's canceled. And then negative 6y cubed divided by 2y cubed is what? So the y cubes cancel, just negative 3. All right, now for the second group, what's my GCF? between -7y and 21? Do you want it to be a positive or negative? So let's try factoring out a -7, and you can always erase it later if it doesn't work. If I factor out a -7, so does that give me a common binomial? So what's -7y divided by -7? Positive y, and what's 21 divided by -7? So good. If you had tried a +7, you would have seen the signs are opposite. Just change the sign and that usually fixes it. So then my answer is what? What's my common binomial? Y minus 3, and what makes up the other parentheses? 2y cubed minus 7. All right, so common binomial in one of the parentheses, GCFs in the other. All right, the one I'll have you try will be 12. So try number 12. So looks like grouping the first two and the last two worked. These are similar terms because they both have a C. These are similar terms because of the coefficients, and they both have D. All right, now factor the GCF from each group. So from the first group, just a C squared they had in common. In the second group, it was -7D that they had in common. And it had to be negative, so that way we get a common binomial with the other group. All right, so you should have a common binomial after step 2. Otherwise, you might have to adjust what you factored out. That will always be part of your answer, the common binomial. How do we get the other parentheses? What are these? Your GCFs or your leftovers, whatever you want to call it. Questions on 12? All right, we're almost done. But the other thing that I need to show you is that the similar terms aren't always set up next to each other. So we're going to look at the bottom where it says rearranging terms. All right, so again, if you're factoring by grouping, you need to have similar terms. Okay, so actually let me erase that. Rearrange terms so that similar terms are next to each other. So that similar terms are together. And I don't necessarily want you to write down what I'm writing for 15 so far. I'll tell you when. But if I just jumped in and tried grouping the first two and then the last two, well, I do have a GCF between these two terms. What would be that GCF? X, and then I factor it out. But then do I have a GCF in the red group? No. So that's why you do have to rearrange it sometimes. Don't just say that it's prime. All right, explore all your options. So if I rearrange it, what groups or what terms should be next to each other? Two XY should be next to, I did see someone do that earlier, but I'm not sure it'll work with the other one. You want to try that? I think 2XY and -10Y would be considered similar terms. All right, because they both have a Y. If I want to have a common binomial, Since these other two don't have y's, that might be my best bet. I have seen people pair other terms together and still get the same answer. But I know this way works, so let's try it this way. So if I'm rearranging it, just make sure that you keep the signs the same. So this was positive, this was negative. And then bring the other two terms on the other side. And so now these are grouped together and those are grouped together. What would be the GCF of the blue group? 2y, so then factor that out. What's 2xy divided by 2y? And what's negative 10y divided by 2y? Negative 5. All right, now for the second set, what is the GCF of these two? Just x. We'll see if we want it to be positive or negative. What is 5x divided by x? And what's negative x squared divided by x? Positive or negative? Now, is x minus 5 the same as 5 minus x? No. Order matters with subtraction. The signs are opposites. So this is positive, this is negative. This is a negative 5, this is a positive 5. So what can I change right here to make it so that the signs switch? We can make the x negative. And now when we factor it out, what's 5x divided by negative x? Give me a negative 5. And then what is negative x squared divided by negative x? Negative divided by negative gives me a positive. And now they are equivalent. They're in a different order, but the signs match up. The 5s are both negative, the x's are both positive. So that is okay. Factor out the common binomial, so x minus 5, or if you'd rather put negative 5 plus x, that's the same thing. Factor out the common binomial, and the other parentheses will be the GCF, so 2y minus x. Questions on 15? All right, then you try, actually I'll make you do 18, so you have some negatives in there. You try 18, and I have seen 2 correct ways to do it. Your final answer will be the same if you do it right. So just try 18, and we'll go over it in a little bit. All right, for 18, what terms did you pair together? 10ab is similar to negative 14b. I have seen someone pair it with the negative 15a, but then if you do that, then there's no GCF between the 21 and this one. So it does have to be these two, the ones with the b's. I think the variables are the most helpful. All right, and then the other two get paired together. So rearrange it. Make sure you keep the signs consistent with what they were originally. So positive 10ab, negative 14b, positive 21, negative 15a. Now between the first group, what's the GCF? Ten and 2 have, or not 10 and 2, I gave it away. The GCF between 10 and 14 is, and then any variables I can factor? I can factor out 1b, because they both have a b. What's 10ab divided by 2b? 5a is correct. And then negative 14b divided by 2b. Negative 7. All right, and then the second group. What's the GCF between the second group? Did you guys do a positive or negative 3? So if 5a minus 7 is our common binomial, then I want those signs to match up then. So we're dividing negative 15a by a positive 3. Give me a positive 5a. So then it has to be a negative 3 that we factor out. So it's negative 3, or sorry, 21 divided by negative 3. And negative 15a divided by negative 3. Positive 5a. Are the parentheses, even though they're in an opposite order, are they equivalent? Yes, the 7s are both negative, the 5a's are both positive. So my common binomial, you can write as 5a minus 7 or negative 7 plus 5a. Common binomial is part of the answer. What's the other part? Your GCF, so 2b minus 3. Questions about that? Yes?
I didn't know you said we were
Let me see. I guess 21 and 14 we don't have to use that. Oh wait, they negative 7. Okay, yeah, then that does work. As long as you get the same signs on the final answer, so as long as 7 is negative, the 3 is negative, the 5a and the 2b are positive, then it works. Is that what you got? Okay. So any other questions? So there can be more than one right way as long as you're following the steps. All right, so that gives you only 10 minutes to work on your practice. So I think I'll exempt this class from the exit ticket unless you feel like taking it. The password's on the board. So work on your practice. I am still going to check it like a couple minutes before class ends, just so that we can get it out of the way. If you want the full points, you can always upload it to Schoology when you do finish.